In part 1 of this series of 12 videos titled Guru Nanak's Canvas, we put forth a premise. The premise was that Guru Nanak's portrait of Sikhi was painted over a canvas that had existed for 4,000 years prior to Guru Nanak. Now, what I mean by that in the philosophical sense is that Guru Nanak redefined in a revolutionary way all the spiritual concepts of that pre-existing canvas. So while all the concepts of the old canvas are found mentioned in the Sri Guru Granth Sahib, they have been redefined. They have been given new meanings. They have been assigned Gurbani meanings. And if we intend to appreciate the Sikhi of Guru Nanak, we will need to understand the new meanings or redefined meanings of the concepts as contained within the Sri Guru Granth Sahib. In part 2, we examined the concept of death, in particular how Gurbani had first realigned and then redefined death. In today's short video, we will look at the concept of afterlife, or after death if one prefers. Let's begin with the narrative of afterlife as provided by the 4,000-year-old canvas. The main beliefs of that canvas can be found within the Garuda Puran, a Sanskrit text composed in the 1st or 2nd millennium BC and containing some 19,000 verses. The first belief is knowability. The claim is that all is fully known about the nature and character of life after death. Second, the journey is outlined to a high degree of specificity. The narrative is that the soul goes into an incredulous journey of its own into the beyond. Third, the milestones of the journey of afterlife are provided. The 4,000-year-old canvas provides details right down to the day-by-day account of how the soul leaves the body, how long it lingers around, where it goes, where it stops for its different functions, and what life forms it takes eventually. Fourth, that the departed soul stops for judgment. The narrative is that it takes 1 year, 365 days for the soul to reach the point and place of judgment. The Sanskrit word for 1 year is 1 bars. The word barsi is used to commemorate this day of arrival of the soul for judgment. The concept of barsi and of celebrating barsis is a concept that belongs to this 4,000-year-old canvas. Fifth, the departed soul is ordered onto 3 different routes. 1, to heaven, or 2, to one of the 21 different hells, or 3, it reincarnates. These routes are determined by the outcome of the judgment by Dharmaraj. In the case of reincarnation, the soul may take the form of an ant or an elephant or any other animal, insect, bird or reptile to begin its journey of avagavan and then go through the entire 8.4 million cycle of life forms to come back as a human being. Sixth, the last rites, by which we mean the funeral, cremation and burial, these are critical in that they prepare the soul for the journey. They must be done right. They must be done by the right people, at the right time, in the right way, with the right paraphernalia, with the right prayers. And finally, this entire cycle repeats. The chilling, scary and petrifying details of this journey, never traveled by anyone ever, were contained within numerous other concepts of the old canvas. All this about a journey that no one has traveled and a destination from which no one has come back to tell a story of. All this about a journey that no one really knows anything about, but presented with amazing specificity, with full and complete knowability, and in amazing counts, exactly 21 different types of hells and exactly 8.4 million life forms to reincarnate into. All this about a journey that talks of 365 days, 1 year, 1 baras, during a period when the concept of a solar calendar and the notion of 365 days had not yet come into existence. Nevertheless, the narrative is presented as a religious fact and a religious truth, and believed by millions and accepted by millions more as the truth. Imagine the illogic of it, the insanity of it, being on a journey that is real in the here and the now, living a journey of real life, but living it in fear, in dread, and in agony, in worry of an imaginary and clergy concocted journey in the afterlife that no one really knows anything about. And the fear and agony is not forced upon anybody. It is suffered in choice. It is suffered by choice. It is suffered by those who choose to believe in the clergy concocted tales of afterlife. What is most chilling, however, is that this narrative of afterlife, drawn from the 4,000-year-old canvas, is the exact one that is presented by our clergy, our granthis, our ragis, our pracharaks, and our kirtaniyas in our gurdwaras as Sikhi beliefs. A vast majority of Sikhs celebrate Barsis, even though the basis of the Barsi is the 4,000-year-old canvas. Our granthis, ragis, and kirtaniyas sing shabbats from the Sri Guru Granth Sahib during the death ceremonies of our loved ones and their Barsis, but present narratives derived from the Garuda Puran to our Sangats. In short, it's Kirtan of Gurbani, but discourse of the Garuda Puran. The Kirtan is of compositions that are derived from the repainted canvas of Guru Nanak, but the discourse, the narrative, the sermon is anchored completely in the 4,000-year-old discarded canvas. The Kirtan is from the canvas of Guru Nanak, but the messages are from the 4,000-year-old discarded canvas. The incongruence is mind-boggling. It is baffling, but the outcome is clear. The outcome is that the narrative that is held within the psyche of a vast majority of Sikhs is not the narrative of Gurbani, but that of the 4,000-year-old canvas. And this vast majority of Sikhs mistakenly think and accept and believe the narrative of Garuda Puran to be the narrative of Gurbani. Nothing can be further than the truth. Nothing can be more tragic than accepting as Gurbani truths all that has been rejected as clergy concocted narratives. Nothing is more tragic than to mire, to smother, to drown a spirituality that takes us to the heights of liberation, the spirituality of Gurbani, and drown that spirituality in a swamp of clergy concocted narratives. So, Pyareo, what is the narrative of afterlife within Gurbani? We can develop the basic principles by examining some verses that discuss the concept. The first thing that Gurbani does is to provide a critique of the claims pertaining to knowability of the 4,000-year-old canvas. The claim that they know where the soul goes, they know that it is taken by the angels of death, the Jamdut, and that they know what happens to it all the way. Let's begin with this verse of Guru Nanak on page 75 of the Sri Guru Granth Sahib. चौथे पैरे रहन के वनजारिया मित्रा लावी आया खेत जहाँ जम पकड़ चलाया वनजारिया मित्रा किसे ना मिलिया भेत भेत चेत हर किसे ना मिलियो जहाँ जम पकड़ चलाया. This portion of verses is from a 4-para shabad that divides our life into 4 phases, beginning with conception. This verse talks about the 4th and final phase of life, chauthe pehre. And the metaphor is of a field. The final phase of a field is the harvesting. Hence the term Lavi Aya Khet. Khet is the field and Lavi is the farmer. So this is the final phase where the farmer has come to harvest his field. The metaphor tells us that the verse is a narrative of physical death, the final phase of physical life. The phrase "Jaan jam pakad chalaya vanjarya mitra" means where the soldiers of death, jam, takes us, pakad chalaya. This notion of soldiers of death taking the soul away comes from the 4,000-year-old canvas. Guru Nanak is mentioning it to provide a critique. He is not endorsing it. If he endorsed it, there would be no critique. You cannot endorse something and critique it within the same sentence. And there is a critique here. And the critique is within the same verse, the same sentence. The critique is in the second part of the same verse. Kisse na miliya pet. None of those who make the claim knows. Despite claims of knowing, Guru Nanak is saying in the clearest of language, they do not know. Kisse na miliya pet. None of those who claim to know have come to know. The claim that they know is made on not knowing. The next verse makes it absolutely clear that the unknowability, the not knowing anything, refers not to anything else but pertains to claims as to where one goes after death and in the afterlife. The verse is, Pet chet har kise na bileo ja jam pakad chalaya. The phrase Pet chet har, in particular the use of the word har with the sihari, is telling indeed. The word har refers to the omnipresent creator in Gurbani. Guru Nanak is saying that the knowability is of the creator. Pet chet har means the knowability belongs to the creator, because matters pertaining to his creation are his dominion. Pet chet har means knowability is the exclusive domain of the creator, not to those making claims that they know, and never to those claiming to know, certainly not to those who concoct the narratives of the afterlife. The message here is that the knowability of afterlife, as provided by the 4,000-year-old canvas, is not true. It is fake, it is concocted. This is a Gurbani principle, a Gurmat principle, Pet chet har kise na milyo. So, Pyareo, what we have in this verse of Guru Nanak is the spiritual truth of Guru Nanak, which is that the knowability of the old canvas is not to be accepted on the one hand, and on the other hand, what we have is the untruth, the lie of knowability of an imagined, concocted, illusory and make-believe narrative of afterlife. Here is another verse of Guru Nanak on page 648 of the Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji. Mahalla Pehla. Ek dajja, ek dabbiya, ek na kutte khahe, ek pani vich usattiya, ek phi fir hasan pahe. Nanak ev na ja pai, kithe jahe samahe. In this verse, Guru Nanak lays out the processes that are put into place in accordance with the old canvas to prepare the soul for its journey into the afterlife, into the next world and on to its next life. The claim, according to the 4,000-year-old canvas, is that these processes pertaining to the final rites are important because they prepare the soul for its afterlife. The final rites are critical because how they are done will decide what happens in the afterlife. The final rites must be done properly by qualified clergy, else the soul will not reach its destination. Guru Nanak says in this verse, some are cremated, ek dajja. Some are buried, ek dabbiya. Others are fed to animals even, ek na kutte khahe. Some are given water burials, ek pani vich usattiya. and some put into wells, ek phi fir hasan pahe. Guru Nanak makes his conclusion clear in the next verse. Nanak ev na japai. Nanak, these processes have no way of providing knowability. Na japai kithe jahe samahe. There is no knowing of where the soul goes based on the last rites. Two things are being put into the dustbin of spirituality here by Guru Nanak. One, the claim that the processes of last rites determine the journey of afterlife. And two, the afterlife itself. Both are concocted. The processes of getting to a concocted destination has to be concocted because the destination itself is concocted. If I gave you directions to a destination that did not exist, then Pyareo, the directions are automatically fake on account of the fact that the destination itself is fake. This verse of Guru Nanak thus lays out the Gurmat principle that the knowability claim of the 4,000-year-old canvas is not accepted by Guru Nanak, not accepted within Gurbani, and hence not a Gurmat belief. The strong and robust critique of Gurbani as presented above achieves two objectives. Number one, it removes the claim of the old canvas that the narrative of afterlife and the detailed journey of the departed soul is a truth. Gurbani is saying it is not. Number two, the critic lays the groundwork for the truth of Gurbani. So now you may want to ask, what then is the accepted view of Gurbani, Sikhi and Gurmat pertaining to afterlife? Let's look at this verse of Guru Nanak on page 940 of the Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji. This verse is taken from a Bani titled Siddh Gosht, meaning dialogue with the Siddhs. The Siddhs asked Guru Nanak this very question, Kahan te aave, kahan e jave, kahan e rahe samai. What is the origin of life? Kahan te aave. Where does it go to? Kahan e jave. What is its ultimate destination? Kahan e rahe samai. And Guru Nanak's answer is, Hukme aave, hukme jave, hukme rahe samai. Translation, the origin of life is by way of hukam, hukme aave. Its return is by hukam, hukme jave. Its ultimate destination is by way of hukam, hukme rahe samai. Where is this narrative of the hukam found? Guru Nanak says it in the next verse. Pure gurte saj kamave, gatamit shabade pai. The narrative is within the messages of the Shabbat. Complete understanding of the hukam is obtained through the Shabda, gatamit shabade pai. What then is the hukam for life after death? Let's look at this Shabad on page 885 of the Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji. Ramkali Mahalla Panjama. Pavana meh pavan samaya, jyoti beh jyot ral jaya. Mati mati hoi ek, rovan hare ki kavan tek. Kaun mua re kaun mua, Brahm gyani bel karo bichara, e to chalat paya rahao. This Shabad contains the Gurmat and Gurbani position on three things. One, it defines physical death. Two, it tells us what happens to life after death. And three, it speaks of the afterlife itself. Let's look at these three issues one by one. Physical death is defined as the return of elements to their source. Verse 1. Pavana me pavan samaya. And verse 3, mati mati hoi ek. Air to air, water to water, dust to dust, earth to earth. In verse 5, Padsha says, e to chalat paya, meaning this is the cycle. There are no exceptions. Every molecule of air, every molecule of water, every molecule of dust and earth, every eon of physical matter within the human body goes back to its source. No exceptions, no processes, no conditions, no exclusions, no matter what the last writes, e to chalata paya, meaning this is the cycle, no matter what, that's the cycle. As for life itself, it too returns to its source, the creator. Jyoti mein jyot ral jaya. That's the only journey it undertakes. Back to its origins, back to the supreme being, back to its source. Ralajaya means it merges. There is no other journey. Jyoti mein jyot ralajaya. Every life, every soul, every atma, every jyot, every light, call it what you wish, goes back to its source. Everyone merges. Jyoti mein jyot raljaya. No exceptions, no processes, no conditions, no exclusions, no rituals, no judgments of any kind after death. Every atma merges. Jyoti mein jyot raljaya. Why? Because the source of every jyot is the Param Jyot. Because the source of every atma is the Param Atma. That is what this whole Shabbat is about. It is about going back to the source. It's about going back to the origins. It's about going back to the root of it all. That is the cycle of everything. Eto chalata paya, meaning this is the cycle. This is the hukum of life. Everything comes from a source and everything goes back to the source. Eto chalata paya. If there were any exceptions, if there were any conditions, processes, exclusions, etc., then we need to ask, what are they? Where are they mentioned in the Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji? And more importantly, why are they not mentioned in the Sri Guru Granth Sahib? And we must not confuse the conditions, processes, etc. of the 4,000-year-old discarded canvas with the messages of Gurbani. For those of us who may be asking, will this and that person's life too go back to its source, to its origin? Will this and that evil person's life too conform to Jyoti mein jyot raljaya? The answer is simple. All we need to determine is whether this and that person's life came from a different source, a different origin. If the air, water and dust in everybody's existence came from the same source and goes back to the same source, then Pyareo, everybody's life, everybody's soul, jyot, atma, light, call it what you like, everybody's too came from the same source and goes back to the same source. That is the cycle of life. It comes in hukum, it goes back in hukum. Hukume aave, hukume jave, hukume rahe samai. The origin of life is by way of hukum. Its ultimate destination is by way of hukum. The hukum is one of a cycle. Eto chalata paya, meaning this is the cycle. The cycle is that all things return to the origins. Matter returns to the source of the matter, and life returns to the source of life. There is only one source of life, and that is the creator of life. Bhakt Kabir Ji expresses it this way on page 1103 of the Sri Guru Granth Sahib. Odak samunda salal ki sakhya nadi tarang samavenge sunna sun milya samdarsi pavan roop hoye javenge bahur hum kahe avenge. Translation: just like water from the river merges into the water of the oceans, just like waves merge into the water, just like air merges into air, I too will return to my pure and complete origin. Pavan roop hoye javenge. Then Kabir Ji says, bahur hum kahe avenge, meaning, what then is there about coming back? What then is there about afterlife? What then is there about reincarnation? What then is there about returning? Bahur hum kahe avenge. What then is there about a second coming? Kabir is asking a very direct question. Bahor hum kahe aavenge? How and why then should I come back? There is no coming back if the hukam is one of merging with the source. And Guru Arjan Ji says it very clearly, Jyoti mein jyot ral jaya. And Kabir says the same thing by saying Pavan roop hoye javenge. It's a hard-hitting critique at the claims of the 4,000-year-old canvas. It's a damning critique of the clergy concocted tales that we do come back after going through the 8.4 million cycle. The notion of coming back is contradictory to Jyoti mein jyot ral jaya. The notion of coming back is incongruous to Pavan roop hoye javenge. The notion of reincarnating is antithesis to Bahor hum kahe aavenge. So we need to ask ourselves the same question. Bahor hum kahe aavenge? Our clergy, granthis, our ragis, kirtaniyas, pracharaks, who keep harping on and on promoting the rejected 4,000-year-old canvas like a broken record in our gurdwaras and in their sermons, need to pay attention to this question. Bahor hum kahe aavenge? How and why then should I come back? Our clergy have a reason to not ask, not tell, and not preach the truths of Gurbani. They have a reason to sweep this verse, Bahor hum kahe aavenge, under the carpet and to keep it there forever. They need to keep us in fear, in distress, and in anxiety, because our fear, our anguish, and our anxiety feeds their livelihoods. But what reason do we have to not ask ourselves, Bahor hum kahe aavenge? Why are we not asking it? What reason do we have to choose to believe, accept, and live in the dread of a 4,000-year-old canvas of a belief system that was consigned to the dustbin of spirituality by Guru Nanak? Gurbani is liberating. It is emancipating. It frees us to live our lives without fear, without anxiety, without disquiet of concocted tales of non-existent journeys and equally non-existent destinations. Gurbani allows us to live our lives in the here and the now to the fullest, to live our lives virtuously, to live our lives to become divine in the here and the now. But we will have to make the choice. Even if our clergy, granthis, ragis and pracharaks won't allow us to, we will have to make the choice of discarding the 4,000-year-old canvas. The choice of discarding our clergy who feed off that discarded canvas. We will have to make the choice of letting Guru Nanak paint over the canvas that is our mind with his portrait of Sikhi and Gurbani. Gurbani makes it absolutely clear that this life is all we have, all there is to it. This life is the only life for us. There is no other. Not a second one, not a third one, not a fourth one, and certainly not the 8.4 millionth one either. We have this verse on page 1366 of the Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji. Kabir, मानस जन्म दुलंभ है होए ना बारे बार ज्यों बन फल पाके भोएं गरे बोर ना लागे डार. Kabir, human life is priceless. Human life is precious. मानस जन्म दुलंभ है. Why is it priceless? Why is it precious? Because it does not occur a second time. Because it doesn't happen again. Hoye na bare bar. When something can and does happen again and again, then by definition it can be worthless, but it certainly cannot be priceless and precious. But human life is only once. Hence, it is priceless. Kabir explains with a metaphor. Jyon ban phal paake poe gire. Just like a fruit that drops to the ground when it ripens, it does not ever go back to the branch again. Bahor na lage dar. The meaning of the verse is, Kabir, human life is priceless and does not occur a second time. Just like a fruit that drops to the ground when it ripens, it does not ever go back to the branch again. Pyareo, when you stop living in fear of a concocted journey of afterlife, you start walking the real journey of real life in joy. And you start walking the journey of spirituality of liberation. When you stop chasing the spirituality of the journey of afterlife, you start living the spirituality of the here and the now. When you stop chasing the wrong things, you give the right things a chance to catch you. When you discard the Gurbani discarded narratives of the old canvas, you start living the truths of Gurbani. The next video, part 4 of 12, will examine the concept of 8.4 million life forms. It will attempt to provide the new, redefined and Gurbani meanings as outlined within the 1429 pages of the Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji. I hope you will continue to join me in this discovery of Gurbani concepts as contained within Guru Nanak's canvas.